How do you build in depth and detail to your stories while you're writing? Like, how do you kind of like make it resonate, and does everything get constructed at the same time, or do you do just the basic, even when you're just outlining in your head, is it just the basic story and then you figure out a way to make it emotional or where the heart is, or kind of get into like that second and third level of the stories?
I'm famously not good at heart. If you ever see any of my movies, if there's heart, I didn't put it there. They had to bring somebody in to put the heart in. I'm not a big fan of cheap emotion on screen, which there seems to be a lot of. And so I just can't do it. I'd rather have it be a little, off center and come at it. The emotion comes at you from a different angle, which doesn't go down well with a lot of people. So
now, Rescue Me has tons of heart.
Does it?
I think so. I mean, those are very vulnerable characters, and you ache for them in some of the situations they're put in.
We are merciless, I think, with those characters in terms of getting them as close to some kind of happiness or stability and then yanking it away from them at the last minute. So that's just manipulative, terrible stuff. But I don't, it's funny, I would never say, oh, there's a lot of heart in anything that I've written. I suppose there is. I mean, they are real characters and we love them. We love them and we love to write them. So I don't know.
Are you ever conscious of the entertainment value or the comedy coexisting with an emotional layer, even if it's not what you're setting out to do, that once you arrive at it, it's there, and if you do, how do you kind of reconcile blending the two? In
the case of A Rescue Me, it's an unusual show in that it is wildly comedic at times, and it's scatological and crazy. And we've figured out, I don't think that this was an edict, I think we just figured out over time, as crazy as it gets, within that same episode, it must get that dramatic as well. So it has to even out. It's like a seesaw. You put this much funny on this side, it better be this much drama on the other side. So we did an episode, I think, in the first season that Dennis actually generated the first draft on, where the guys they're having a cock measuring contest. And I thought, oh my God, are we really gonna do this? Well, we killed a guy in the same episode. So if you measure your cock, somebody's gonna die. That's the way it goes on the show.
That was the rule.
That's the rule. That's written down.
Was it someone involved in the cock measuring, or was it an innocent bystander?
It was sort of a secondary firefighter character.
So it was really the viewer that was culpable for enjoying the cock measuring. Now you get a death.
That's right. We took them down.
Right.
But I think in terms of other stuff, look, I, for the most part, try to ground characters in some kind of reality.
Well, just like Heaven and America's Sweethearts have a lot of emotion going on around the entertainment value aspect of those films and the comedic set pieces.
Yeah.
Was that a conscious effort to weave the more heartfelt elements into those stories?
Yeah, again, not my first choice. I mean, if I was writing America's Sweethearts, it would have been darker, a little more biting, but I think people have seen enough. And I wrote that soon after Larry Sanders. In fact, I didn't necessarily want to write it because I thought it was more backstage Hollywood stuff. So it wasn't really my first choice. As time went on, we got Julia Roberts. And it became a different movie at that point because, she's just a huge star. So
suddenly the burden goes up on...
The burden goes up on...
Now this movie has to appeal to all four quadrants of moviegoer.
Yeah, and she says, she said, I don't want to play the star. I want to play the star's sister who used to be fat. And that's great. That is a fantastic choice. But at the same time, it's Julia Roberts, and you want to give her screen time. And so now the story has to adjust. Right. Where that was a secondary character, she has to be brought up a little bit more and made more integral to the story. So that all happened. And I have no argument with that because that movie made $100 million. Without Julia Roberts, I don't know that it would have made anything close to that.
But it's interesting that some stars, when they get that big, the secondary role appeals to them more because in a way it's fresher for them and they feel like they don't have to carry the whole movie.
I think I've worked with a lot of famous people, but I think that's the first time I worked with somebody who was like a superstar. Mm-hmm. And I felt more than anything, like she would care that I would feel sorry for her, but to be trapped by that is such a trap in everything. Forget her life. One time I was shooting, it may have been The Job, but I was in New York and I'm down in Union Park or whatever, and I'm on the sidewalk on an early morning, and a woman comes by, all bundled up with sunglasses, and it's Julia. And I kind of went, and she went, don't say hello. Because she didn't want to stop, she didn't want to.
Sure.
There were too many people around.
That's a strange, surreal circumstance.
It's tough. Mm-hmm. a tough way to live your life. It's also a tough way to do your work.
Right. You kind of understand Dietrich's goodbye routine and Garpo's goodbye routine.
And watching Julia on the set of that movie, I went, she knows what she's created here, and she's doing it. She's giving, it's really giving them what they want. Right. And she does it in a good, in a not a slavish way, but she, I don't know, it must be awfully hard to be her.
Do you have any set rules for beginning and ending scenes or action, writing action? Like, do you have any set time limits for how long a scene can be? And just
a scene tells you how long it's going to be. Okay. I've got a clock in my head that says, I don't want to stay too long at the fair. I've done everything I need to do here. I mean, every time you write a scene, you got to know what's the point, why am I doing this scene, what am I saying? As soon as you say it, get the hell out. That's it. And if you can then, all of this is just sort of writing 101 stuff, but if in a comedy, you should try and either go out on a joke or go out on something that propels you to the next scene. Either way, those are two of the major choices there, but that's really
something that gives you forward momentum, but also can get a laugh in there.
Yeah, if you can do both, that's great. But definitely something that makes the viewer go, "Oh, what's next?"
And how do you handle the writing, the dialogue? Does it go? Is it just along with everything else, or does it come later, or does that get revised constantly as you're writing, even your internal drafts?
Yeah, I tend to write a really bad draft first, really quickly. That'll take 2 days. Where it's just, I know what I want to say in the scene. Sometimes I'll be writing and I'll go, character name, this is what I want to say in the scene, and I'll write it right just like that, terribly, because I know what the scene is, and then I'll skip to the next scene and go, I want to do this, so it's really lousy. And then I'll read it again and go, well, that's not too bad.
Right.
And I'll keep a lot of it, but then I'll actually go in and do all the refinements of the dialogue and find new things and make changes like that.
Do you ever have contemporaries or other writers kind of read your work before it goes out in the world as a little support group, or people whose opinions you solicit?
I never took a class for anything in writing. So I never had a mentor. I never studied. I didn't have any of that stuff. And so as a result, my mindset doesn't work that way where I think I need other people. I wish I had. I wish I'd started that way. I wish I'd gone to school. I wish I'd had a lot of friends who had the same interest as I did, and it didn't work out that way. So I tend to write it and send it where it needs to go.
You're the Shane of screenwriters. You're the man alone. Come in, do your job,
come back,
go off into the sunset.
That's it. That's it. I write it. Like I told you, I'll maybe read something to my wife if I think it's really good.
Right.
She's the only one who hears anything. And then, every now and then, once something's moving to the next stage, or especially some of my own work that I'm going to direct or whatever, there are people, producers in town, other writers, directors who I'll go, hey, just give me your thoughts. Just tell me what you think, if any missteps here or whatever, and I'll send it to them. But that's usually after the fact.
With your work on television, either Larry Sanders or more recently with Rescue Me, you're dealing with, I imagine, a writing staff. Do you find that's helpful to your process in terms of, now that you're doing Rescue Me, do other writers on the staff kind of, contribute to what goes into your episodes, either as a director or as a writer-director?
Most of the way that we did have a staff on Larry Sanders, and that was, we do some rewriting in the room. I'm not a big fan of rewriting in the room. I just, again, because of this solitary thing, I'd rather do it myself. And there's a lot of showrunners who have the same thing. I think Larry David did that quite a bit, where, initially, and that's natural because it's your show, you understand it more than anybody else. You can't hire people and expect them to have the same mindset as you do. So it just is easier and less time consuming if you write it yourself. And I think on most of the shows that I've done, that's what happens. On Rescue Me and on The Job, Dennis and I created those shows. We understand the characters to those shows. We do most of the writing. We've just recently hired somebody else, but for the most part, it's 3 people. And if it was 22 shows, maybe we couldn't get away with that. But what eventually happens is one or both of us rewrite all those scripts. So we're generating a lot of work. So we don't, but at the same time, we listen to notes. We have our cast, who's great, and when they say, "Hey, what if?" we listen to that, and many times we write things for them. So, we're open to things, but it's mostly us.
And as a writer, where do you find your inspiration? Where do you find most of your inspirations come from?
Fear. I think fear, deadlines. Like I say, I'll sit around thinking for a long time, and then, eventually somebody will call and go, where exactly is that script? And okay, I'll do it. I can't say, sometimes, I hate to say this, but sometimes I'm inspired by jealousy and envy. I'll go, somebody else will do something wonderful, and I go, oh, damn it, I can do that. And then sit down and, do some work I should do.
Now, did you have a lot of unproduced screenplays before that first produced one? No.
I've been spoiled. I was produced, the first thing I rewrote was My Fellow Americans, a comedy with Jack Lemmon and Jim Garner, and it got made. And I had an unusual run that everything I rewrote got made, then until we got to Walter Mitty, which you were talking about.
Now, Walter Mitty, describe your experience on a long gestating. This has been a long gestating remake of the Danny Kaye film based on the short story "The Secret Life of Walter Mitty." It's been at a few studios.
Yeah, sure, and continues to be talked about every now and then. I just Jim Carrey was attached at the time. He was doing the Andy Kaufman movie, so I didn't really have anyone to talk to.
Right.
It was through New Line, but I didn't really have anyone to talk to him.
If you wanted Andy Kaufman's input on Walter Mitty, you could have gotten that.
What I was told was I couldn't call Jim during the week because he was Andy.
Jim wasn't in. Yeah.
He wasn't there. And then on the weekends I could talk to him. So I did talk to him once. But eventually I just couldn't crack it. It was a tough movie in terms of its structure to make it seem interesting and to sustain it. And also you couldn't get around the fact that the basic structure of it was dated and it's hard to do.
So there are some cases with remakes where things are so of their time that it's very, very hard to kind of brush them off and make them contemporary.
You would think that you could really update anything. But in terms of, I think in some ways,
Birth of a Nation might be hard, getting back to our racial jokes.
That's a little rough. But I think in that case, I think audiences are too sophisticated now to be surprised by the idea of a guy who has daydreams.
Right.
Those daydreams have to be pretty darn wonderful to have people go, wow, I never would have thought, I've never seen that before.
Right. You could almost do the NC-17 if there were porno daydreams.
Yeah.
That's the one frontier that hasn't been crossed.
It would have to be
fantasy-wise.
Secret Life of Walter Smutty or something like that.
You could do that with Howard Stern starring.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you do anything in particular to stay open to input from the world at large, or do you draw from kind of like real life experiences in the world at large?
Yeah, I try to keep, and I try to stand above myself a lot of the time and see what I'm going through. Many of the times when I've written things, people go, can you relate to this? Yes, I can, and I know exactly what I've gone through. Sometimes I'll take jobs because I know exactly what that character's going through because I've gone through it myself.
Where did Analyze This come from as an idea?
It was not my idea. The original draft of that was written by Ken Lonergan. And I never read it.
Oh, the playwright Kenny Lonergan?
Yeah, Ken wrote some movie, and he got, I think we shared screenplay credit. So whatever he wrote must have been, I wish I'd read it. But I read the second guy's script, and it was getting a little broad. And I went to whoever, Paula Weinstein I think was producing, and I said, look, if you want to make this movie, people have to believe it. And the only way they're going to believe it is, first of all, if it's somewhat grounded in the screenplay. It's got to be grounded in the screenplay. But I said, your real problem is going to come in casting, because you've got to get somebody of tremendous weight to play this part, where the audience comes in fully believing that it could be the guy. And I said, you got to get De Niro. I'm prescient, so from day one I'm saying, you got to get De Niro. So my goal in writing that script was to get De Niro. From day one, was to write something that he would go, yeah, I'll do this. Because that was like a long shot. He hadn't done comedy.
That was the first time. It was way before Meet the Parents.
Way before. That opened the floodgates, as it were.
Right.
And
now he's Lou Costello, practically.
That's right. Yeah. I'm not going to take credit for that, for his comedy thing, but I definitely knew that movie would not work unless the audience was invested in a character that they fully believed could be that guy.
Right, and he makes it believable.
Yeah, and then it got hard. Because while he was interested in doing it, he was interested in doing his version of it, which for him is a very real version. The word fuck is written once in my screenplay. Go watch Analyze This
Right.
and have a clicker nearby. Your thumb will fall off at a certain point. But I then tried to write a draft that was his version, but I still had Billy to deal with and to maintain his character. So I had sort of the light, comedic, fun side, and then I had Goodfellas on this side. I couldn't reconcile the two of them,
right.
and I had to excuse myself from duty. And then other people took over, and then Harold took over, and at the very end called me and said, could you come back and rewrite the screenplay? So 3 weeks before, I rewrote it.
Has that happened often where you do your stint and then are kind of called back at the end during
Not
production?
often enough.
Not often
Mike.
enough.
It's very sad. I know. But that was one time where I felt good, and, because I felt it was strong, and,
right.
and the fact that they called me back, it was great.
When you're writing, do you set goals for yourself in terms of productivity? Like, I have to be done with this by a certain date, or I want to get to this point by a certain date?
Sometimes I've put myself into such a fix that I have no choice but to be productive. So I don't have the luxury of saying, if I get through 20 pages today, I can usually do 20 pages a day. I'll write a Rescue Me in 14 hours.
Wow.
That's only because I know it.
Right.
I know the characters, I know the story, and I've just looked at a clock the last 2 times I've written it, and it's been on the dot 14 hours both times.
Has that evolved over time, kind of your work ethic and how fast you can get stuff done, or has it always been there?
My work ethic is awful. I have no work ethic, and that's why I have to be fast, because I spend too much time screwing around. I wish it wasn't that way. I think I could have been much more productive, but.
What does your workspace look like? Like, where do you do most of your work?
I have a great office on my property. It's not in the house. It's an outbuilding in Montecito on our property there. So what's great about that is I don't see who comes to the house. I can turn the phone off down there, and I don't have that, and it's my own space. So it's great. And
is that very important to have that separate working space?
Oh yeah. I have 3 children. And the first time I had an office in the house, it was on the first floor. So I saw everything. The cars would come up, and of course, I need any excuse not to write. So a car comes up, who's that? Oh hell, I gotta go look. And I gotta get up, and the phone rings, and I gotta answer the phone, and all those things. I don't wanna write. I don't want to. So any excuse I can get, I'm gonna take it. So if I have my own space, I can really just get right into that zone and be totally into the screenplay and the characters and everything like that, and just really grind it out.
Now, your career is marked with a lot of collaborations with people. Do you enjoy working with people, either on other people's drafts or literally with people while you're writing? You've had a lot of great collaborations with directors and actors and whatnot, even from your TV experience. Is that something you enjoy?
I do. I think it's really helpful. I've been really lucky, first of all, in terms of the caliber of people that I've collaborated with. If you look at Billy, Harold Ramis, Dennis, Gary Shandling, these are smart guys. These are really, really talented guys who are writers and performers, or writers and directors. I do enjoy working with a collaborator, as opposed to working in a room of people, because I think at a certain point, that's just cacophony. You're not getting it. There's a diminishing returns. But I love to sit with somebody who's smart, who understands the project, hopefully in the same way that I do, and just throw ideas back and forth. Dennis and I, the first time I met him, I'd seen his stand-up and things, and I thought, I don't know.
Had you met him for the job, the previous show?
For the job,
okay.
Yeah. And I thought he was okay. I wasn't like a huge fan.
Right.
And I thought to myself, because they needed a showrunner. They had no television experience. They needed a showrunner for the job. And I thought, I gave it not much of a shot, just because I thought his personality, mine. But it turns out, he's from Massachusetts. I am. We're about roughly the same age. We know a lot of the same people.
In a way, his stand-up isn't even stand-up. It was like more performance art.
Yeah.
So oddly, probably always better as an actor in a way than what people remember as him as a stand-up. He never really had a stand-up career.
He did, but it was more, like you say, it was more of a performance art thing. So I didn't give it much of a chance. I thought, this is doomed. He seems kind of prickly, and we don't seem anything alike. And it has been one of the more fruitful collaborations I've ever had. I can talk to him on the phone and go, we have a problem with this, What if we? And that starts it. And within minutes, it's solved to our mutual satisfaction. That doesn't happen a lot. So I don't know what that's about, but it's great.
You just clicked with each other.
Totally.
Are there any drawbacks to the kind of collaborations you've had over the course of your career, whether it's with someone famous or well-known or not?
If there are drawbacks, it's that for the most part, and I'm trying to change this,
right.
I have been the lesser person in the equation. Right. That person is more talented than I am, more famous than I am, and as a result they have more power than I do. So at a certain point, it's a collaboration up until the point of the final decision. If they disagree with me, I have only so much, there's only so much argument in me. Mm-hmm. And at a certain point, I'm going to defer to them because I'm not going to have too many arguments with Harold Ramis about comedy structure or anything like that. And I've said things, I think this would work, I think this would work. In the end, it's Harold Ramis. I'm going to defer to him. He's got more experience than I have, by a long shot. I have great respect for him, so at a certain point, I relent. Mm-hmm. That's the only drawback. Maybe I should fight harder.
Well, have you written many spec scripts on your own? Is that something you indulge in or could see indulging in, or have you avoided that mostly?
I've been too busy. I mean,
right.
I get offered a lot of stuff, a lot of comedies, and I turn most of it down, but I get offered a lot of things, and the show takes a lot of time. The only spec that I've written is the movie that I'm going to direct this fall. So,
can you tell us more about it?
That's the movie that I told you about before, the Vegas and going to Vegas and whatever. Yeah.
Oh, great! That sounds so. That's at a point now where you've done all your kind of like writing on it. Now you're trying to put it together.
Yeah, I've got the money finally after about a year and a half, and I've got several. Dennis is going to do it.
Oh, great!
Which is great. And I have some other actors attached to it. So now it's just a matter of scheduling, and I'm going to have to go through and do a production draft now of what I can actually shoot given the money that I have. But it's exciting, and what's great about it, like Larry Sanders and like The Job and Rescue Me, you want to put stuff out there that says to the creative community, hey, this is me.
Right.
Just so you know, I'm not I wrote those other things, but I can't identify myself to those things. This is me. This is what I do well. Now,
do you feel, given that there's that kind of personal, pride of authorship riding on this, we discussed work ethic before, like, do you suddenly feel like everything's on an 11 as opposed to like a 10 just because that one extra inch is because this is going to be your first time out signature movie, this is me, my sensibility? Do you feel a different kind of pressure?
I do. I don't think I'm going to lock up or anything, but I know how important this is to me in the long term. The most important thing to me is getting it onto the screen the way I see it, and I definitely see it. And so I can't say I'm a much more vigilant.
Right. Well, good luck with that. It sounds like a wonderful project.
Yeah.
Do you have any advice for beginning screenwriters or people just kind of starting out?
Well, I have only hackneyed advice. Is if you're a writer, write. I've had too many people over the years come to me and say, oh, I really want to write. And what have you written? Well, nothing. Well, you're not a writer then. So look for something else, because there's a lot of people who really like to write and enjoy, do that. If you're a writer, write. And if you have any kind of talent, if you don't have any talent, put yourself in a situation where you can gain some, hopefully, or maybe do some learning. And once you feel you are talented and feel that your work is of some worth, keep writing and get it to people who can read it, and that's anybody. That's anybody. Because if you're talented, people will recognize it. That's the great thing in a miserable business, that's the great thing about the business. Right. Talent is recognized.
Talent will out itself eventually.
Yes.
Great. Well, we want to thank today's guest, Peter Tolan, for being with us. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
Awesome conversation. Good to see you as well. We want to thank you for watching, and please remember to check out the other great interviews in our series with industry pros. And remember, it all starts with you. The next written by credit could be yours. I'm Mike DeLuca.